Anyway, as I was saying, Scott won his freedom through a legal means on Apocalypse, which was a trial by combat. It was a trial by combat. And he eventually joined the JLA. However, it was during this time that he and Barta tried to be semi-retired and live quiet lives in the suburbs. And of course that led to a lot of funny moments between him and Barta. However, it was during this time with the League that he had an intense rivalry and hatred with a League villain named Manga Khan, who was an intergalactic trader and black marketer who repeatedly kidnapped Scott, ultimately actually convinced, Scott's conniving former manager, Funky Flashman, yes, that is his actual name, into forging documents to force Scott to actually work for Manga as his personal entertainer. To force him to go along willingly, he actually replaced Scott with a lifelike robot who was ultimately murdered by Despero during his first mission with the Justice League. Ultimately, Scott did escape Manga Khan's clutches and did reunite with his friends. However, the shock was enough to cause him to ultimately quit the League and take on a protege in the form of Shiloh Norman. However, during the conclusion of Final Crisis, all of the new gods were reborn, Mr. Miracle and Barta among them. And like all the newly christened like all the other new gods, Mr. Miracle is now actually seemingly and functionally, I might add, immortal, meaning that he has ceased to age. Meaning physically, he has ceased to age by the age of 30. Yeah, I don't know why that was a tongue twister, but that was. So he looks 30 years old, but he's actually probably a lot older now. And he has also developed an immunity to a number of toxins and diseases. And he is actually stronger than a human with superhuman strength, agility, resistance, coordination, reflexes. He was trained as an arrow trooper, being an expert martial artist, and the handling of weapons. Also, he is a master escapologist, expert performer, persuasive, and an extremely ingenious inventor, trained to use advanced technology like the Mother Box, the multi-cube, arrow discs, and other devices. And also, this version of Mr. Miracle possesses the alpha effect, the antithesis of Darkseid's omega energy. The alpha effect, its powers seem to cancel or undo the omega effect caused by, Darkseid. He also has the complete anti-life equation. It is said to bring the being who learns it power to dominate the will of that the person who wields it learns to actually dominate the will of all sentient and sapient races. It is called the anti-life equation because if someone possesses absolute control over you, you're not really alive, but he refuses to use it as it reduces others to being mindless slaves. So basically the anti-life equation is basically one big giant mind control thing, meaning that Scott could actually control Superman, Batman, and pretty much the whole entire Green Lantern Corps, just everybody in the entire universe. And that takes a very strong mind and will, and Scott possesses it to be able to not use it. The only time, if I remember correctly, that he had ever had to use it was on Darkseid. And he managed to get Darkseid to basically maneuver his own Omega beams to shoot him in the face and gravely injure him after his wife Barda had been killed. Or supposedly killed, at least. Beyond that, Scott usually does not, this version of Scott Free does not use it. Now, I'm going to move on to Shiloh Norman really quick. Now, Shiloh Norman is actually the ward of escapologist Thaddeus Brown, the first Mr. Miracle, and he had served as an occasional stand-in. When he was murdered by the mobster Steel Hand, he basically helped travel alongside, Scott Free as an apprentice of sorts. He is actually a master escapologist himself, and now that he was actually, as an adult, he was appointed the security chief on the Slub, and then during Joker's last laugh riot, he was promoted to warden. And whoop, keep knocking the camera around. I'm sorry about that, guys. And he basically, to put it bluntly, Shiloh is basically kind of the third person to take the Mr. Miracle mantle, and I think he's the current Mr. Miracle, or at least the second version that's active in the superhero world. And he is actually part of the Seven Soldiers, or at least part of Grant Morrison's Seven Soldiers crossover. And his outfit is a lot more different. I think he has a lot more apocalyptian-esque technology. As you can tell, this picture right here is actually of Shiloh as Mr. Miracle. This blurry picture, if you can tell, is actually Scott Free. Just to point that out to those of you who keep looking at this. I should have pointed this out earlier. I could go on and on, but honestly, that's about as far as I really want to go, because a lot of it's just mumbo jumbo and other stuff that really doesn't make any sense and whatnot. But yeah, Thaddeus Brown, first Mr. Miracle, got killed by a mobster named Steel Hand. Scott Free, heir to the throne of New Genesis, the Prince of the New Gods. He's immortal, got a whole bunch of really cool abilities. And Shiloh Norman, who is the second person aside from Scott Free to don the Mr. Miracle mantle, at least in current DC chronology timeline. So yeah, that is Mr. Miracle, and what makes Mr. Miracle awesome is simply that he is the greatest escapologist, with Bruce Wayne, Batman, being the only close second to him. So that is it, guys. That's Mr. Miracle.